Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. Things are getting a little chilly around here in West Virginia, and gets me excited about things freezing so we can have less mud. As far as updates go, I just wanted to say we're having a great lineup of interviews. I've got a lot scheduled, so hopefully we can pull those off. And I think, again, not promising, but I think we're going to be able to have an episode almost every week throughout the rest of the year. So those of you in the COVID doldrums coming into lousy holidays where we all have to be social distanced, maybe, just maybe, the Pastured Pig Podcast could bring a little ray of sunshine into your week. Is that too much to ask? All right. Anyway, I digress. Today we have interviewed somebody that actually has their own podcast. Brian has a podcast that is more centered toward homesteading. But of course, within that homesteading genre, he talks about his pigs. So Brian Wells with 3B Farms in beautiful upstate New York, as he would say. And last year I was in upstate New York, and he is right. It is absolutely beautiful. It is nothing like downstate New York. And when I say downstate, I mean New York City. Very stark differences between New York City and upstate New York. But so Brian's going to talk to us about his pigs in particular. And, of course, in the show notes, we'll talk about how you can find his podcast and his website and all that type of stuff. So, without further ado, we're going to jump in and talk to Brian.
Right now, things up here are surprisingly warm. We've had a late Indian summer. We call it that. I don't know if that's politically correct anymore, but that's what we refer to it as.
That's what I always called it when I was a kid, yeah.
And so it's been a late one, but they are forecasting cold weather the end of this week, so back to normal.
All right. So how upstate are you in upstate New York?
We are about an hour north of Albany, so we're right on the Vermont border.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's some beautiful area. We were up there last year, and actually I was literally blown away when I crossed over the state line in Vermont. We were headed to Burlington, Vermont, so we crossed over Lake Champlain, and that was unbelievable. I mean, that was like storybook type stuff. I'd never seen anything that gorgeous.
Absolutely, I refer to it on my podcast as beautiful upstate New York.
Yeah, it's definitely different than downstate New York.
No doubt. And unfortunately, a lot of people, when they think of New York, the only thing they think of is New York City.
Sure, yeah.
And, New York is really a very, very diverse state. Upstate, what they call North Country, which is more up in the Adirondack, Central New York, Western New York, each area just has its own unique culture and feel and look, and it's just an absolutely gorgeous state.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. We really enjoyed it, and we're anxious to go back and explore a little bit more. We're kind of passing through, so we'd love to be able to spend a little more time checking it out.
Well, when you come up this way, make sure 3B Farm is on your list of places to stop.
Yeah, may take you up on that. You want you out. I've been known to sleep in people's driveways. Yeah.
Well, we'd be glad to have you. And by the way, those lights that you recommended have seriously illuminated my garage, and as I told you, now I have a problem. I can see how big of a pack rat I am.
Right, yeah. They did the same thing to my workshop.
Help me fix that.
Yeah, I have to unscrew them, so it looks like I got something done, yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's talk about 3B Farms. First, let's talk about the etymology of the name. Is there something behind 3B, or do you have the world's smallest apiary up there?
Well, it actually has to do with the fact that my name is Brian, my wife's name is Bonnie, and our son is Brian Jr., so it actually comes from that. And it actually kind of got started a little bit tongue-in-cheek. We were going to a church about a half hour away from here, which is located in a more suburban-type area. and we were kind of the oddballs at that church. We had chickens, at that time we didn't have pigs, but we had a garden, and we were doing that kind of thing. And so people started referring to it as the farm. How are things on the farm? Mm. And then it became 3B Farm, and it was kind of all tongue-in-cheek, and that's the background.
Yeah, so it just sticks after that. Yep, very good. All right, so you'd mentioned some polyculture there. You have multiple things going on. I know you really have a pretty big garden and those type of things. But let's talk about your overall setup, farm size, and just maybe do a rundown of what you have and what you guys take care of there.
Sure, we're on a little bit over 2 acres of land. I think it's like 2.16 acres, and our land is very oddly shaped. It's kind of shaped like the head of a golf club. Kind of the shaft comes back, that's our driveway, and then it kind of opens up. And we have a lot of area that is wooded, which is where we keep our pigs. But really the reason why we chose to keep our pigs in that area is because we live on top of what they refer to as Bald Mountain. And in the 1800s, they actually had limestone mining up here. And I'm convinced that as they were mining, our property became the place where they dumped all of the junk rock.
Right.
Because we have lots and lots of stones and rock, and then, if you do have soil in certain places, it's about 18 inches down to shale or, limestone. And it has proven to be very challenging to put in infrastructure, particularly fencing, on this kind of land.
Oh, yeah. My goodness, I can imagine. Driving a T-post isn't the easiest thing to do when you're hitting stone.
Exactly. And then when you think you've got it almost there, and then you bottom out, and you've got to pull it up and start all over again, it's rather disheartening. And it's a good workout, there's no doubt, but not a lot of fun.
Right. So you mentioned it briefly there, but give us a rundown of the different types of farm animals, livestock that you're maintaining.
Right now we have a laying flock. What we do every year, we cycle out our hens. So about a month ago, we had between 80 and 100 standard breed chickens, but now we're down to between 40 and 50. Chicken math, you lose track.
Yeah, exactly.
We also have turkeys, and they're getting ready to go to freezer camp next week, and we'll be out of them. They're broad-breasted whites. We don't keep them over the winter. We also have meat rabbits, although we're just down to what I refer to as 2 freeloading does. My buck died about, I think it was a little over a year ago, and at that point I was wanting to transition from the meat mutts that we have to a breed, a particular breed. And I just haven't kind of gotten around to it, but I just have not had the heart to send my does over the rainbow, so I keep feeding them. So I guess we'll stick around. I guess they become pets.
Yeah, that's easy to do.
And then we also have ducks and geese, and then we have the American guinea hogs.
All right. So let's talk about the American guinea hogs. Why did you choose that breed? Did you have experience with that, and how long have you had them on the farm?
I did not have any experience at all with pigs before we got the American guinea hog, except for the fact that when I was really young, my grandfather would get a couple of feeders in the spring and raise them through to the fall, and then we would send them off to freezer camp. But as far as myself or even growing up with my mom and dad, we had no experience whatsoever with pigs. I had that wooded area that I referenced before that was kind of this rocky, junky area. And not to say that it's a junky area. There's a lot of hickory and oak and those kinds of things in that area. But it just wasn't anything that I was able to do much with. And so I had always kind of in the back of my mind thought that'd be a great to put pigs.
Yeah.
And so my mom subscribed me to Grit Magazine. And I think it was Grit Magazine. It might have been Mother Earth News. I get both. I'm pretty sure it was Grit Magazine. The end of 2016, they had an article on the American guinea hog. And as I started reading through that article, it was just everything that I had ever dreamed of in a pig. It was a smaller breed, and with us having, not a lot of land, I knew I wanted that. It was a breed that's more docile in temperament, and at the time my son was younger, I didn't want to have an animal that I would have to worry about him being around or my wife being around, and so that really, spoke to me as well. And then I loved the fact that it was a heritage breed, and I had the opportunity, if I got involved with the breed, to help a breed recover. And you've detailed, I won't go into all of that, you've detailed that on the podcast in the past as you talk to people about the American guinea hog, but I really like the idea of being able to take part in that. And so as I read about the American guinea hog, I was kind of getting very, very excited about it, but it's one thing to read about something and see it on paper. It's totally another thing to see it in real life, so to speak. And so I jumped on the American Guinea Hog Association website looking for a breeder near me, hoping that within a 4-hour radius there would be somebody that had American guinea hogs. Because as I was reading through it, they were talking about their fairly rare breed, blah, blah, blah. As I went on the association website, what I found is in the town just south of us. And in fact, we call it, it's legally the town south of us, but the kids that live there go to the same high school that my son goes to.
Yeah. And
there happened to be a breeder. And so I got in contact with her and made arrangements, and as soon as I laid eyes on him, I fell in love. And it was just like, that's the pig that I want. And it's been a labor of love ever since. This was in 2016 was when the article came out. Early 2017 is when I went down and saw them, and then it was, by the time I got all the infrastructure in place to house them, it was, I think, April or May of 2017 is when we actually brought the first pigs here.
Yeah, so how many did you start with? Did you start with a breeding pair?
Well, that's, I was supposed to start with a breeding pair. That's what I had talked my wife into, and she had given me the okay to get, a male and a female. And I had made arrangements for a female that was actually bred. And there was the lady that I had been talking to just south of us. She had a boar that I just absolutely loved. He had been a bottle-fed baby. He was a gorgeous-looking pig. And I was relatively ignorant from the standpoint of what makes a good pig at the time, and yet, I don't know, there's just something about, you can look at a pig and you can, I don't know, at least to me, you look at a pig and you can kind of see, does it look like a pig or does it not look like a pig?
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Right.
And it was really a nice-looking pig, great personality, and I was all excited about it, but unfortunately, she had kind of dropped the ball on the paperwork side of things, and she couldn't register him. And I was really bummed, so I started looking around for another boar. And about that time, there was a guy who was, about 3 hours south of me, who had bought a boar and 2 sows. Both sows had just barrowed, and then he had a companion borrow for the boar. And for one reason or another, he decided he needed to get all the way out of pigs. And so the gentleman that I had made the agreement with to get the bred sow, he said to me, if you can work out something with Randy and get that group of pigs, I'll refund you your money.
Oh, wow.
And, which obviously he didn't have to, but he was very gracious. He's a great guy. He's actually the vice president of the American Guinea Hog Association and just absolutely loves pigs. And for him, it's a labor of love as well. And so I was able to make a deal, and initially it was supposed to be me buying the boar and the 2 sows. And then eventually it became the borrow. And then the guy was having a hard time. He thought he had the piglet sold, and he wasn't able to get the piglet sold. And so when it was all said and done, I went from 0 to 14 hogs. My wife is very, very gracious and forgiving. Very much like your wife.
Yeah, sure, exactly.
We are blessed men.
Yeah, can tolerate a lot for sure. That's great, man. I love that.
Absolutely.
That's chicken math applied to pigs.
And so we ended up with 14 pigs, and then at one point, because of some unfortunate fencing mistakes on my part, I had 33 pigs here. I learned a lot about bunny math as it applies to pigs. And that certainly was way too many pigs for the small area that I have here.
Yeah, even for guinea hogs, that's a lot.
To move them, and we're back down to a more manageable amount now.
All right. So even with that number, I assume you guys are not just raising those for your own personal consumption. You're doing some commercial sales with that, right?
Correct. We do. It's one of those things I've been trying to figure out my market, and over the last 4 years, and just about when I think I've got it figured out, something else heads my way. But really what I've been doing is trying to, first and foremost, it is definitely about raising food for us. And, for me, it's just a big part of why we do what we do. It's not so much about, it's that we know what's not in our food, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we're definitely raising pigs for us. I've also raised pigs for other people. So the first part of December, I have 4 pigs that are scheduled to go to freezer camp. And one of those is ours, and the other 3 are for other people. So I sell them by whole share and half share.
Yeah.
And in New York State, they're very, very strict with regards to the laws from the standpoint of unless they're USDA processed, you cannot sell the meat by the package. Even if it's at a state-run facility, it still can only be sold on the hoof, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah.
So I do that, and then I sell feeders to people, and I sell breeding stock. Because, the other thing that I mentioned was that I got into this to really help the American guinea hog breed recover. And so I've been, very, very fortunate to be able to help other people get started into American guinea hogs, whether it's by, raising feeder pigs or by, starting their own breeding herds. So
yeah,
it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, so as far as raising feeders and people looking to start a breed line, how far have you seen people travel to come get your hogs?
I had some people come up from Virginia. That's the farthest that they've come.
Wow.
So far to get pigs from me. A lot of it has been people that are within, an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Sure.
I had a lady that bought a pig from me this spring that was about 2.5 hours away from me up in Vermont, and unfortunately things didn't work out, and I had to drive the 2.5 hours. She came and picked up the pig. I had to drive the 2.5 hours up there to get the sow and bring her back, and all of the piglets. So that was a very, very interesting situation, but it worked out really well for me because as a result of that, she had bought a female from me that she had wanted bred. So I bred the girl back to her father because that was the only boy I had at the time. And I took the pig up there. The pig was just one of the sweetest pigs I've ever had. Absolutely loved this hog. And she farrowed. The entire time she was up there, I was texting the lady back and forth because I always try to follow up with people, make sure things are going well, and, are there any kind of questions? Are there any issues? Because I want to make sure I'm doing right by them. I want to make sure I'm doing right by the breed. I want to make sure I'm doing right by the pig that I sell. And so the pig was up there, and the whole time she's texting me back how sweet of a pig she is and how much she loved her and how much she was thankful that I had sold her the pig. And on Thursday, I get a picture from her of all the piglets, and she was just over the moon, overjoyed with this litter of piglets. And on Sunday, I'm sitting in church, and my phone's going crazy, and I pull it out, and there's this barrage of texts how this pig had turned around, and it had turned nasty. And she was scared of it, and she was afraid to have her grandkids around it, and so on and so forth. And really what it ended up being, after I kind of talked to her, and now that I've had the pig back here on our farm, is that she was used to being around goats. Mm. And there are things that you can do with a kid in front of a mama goat that you cannot do with a piglet in front of a mama pig.
Right, yeah.
And so it was just a matter of the mama was being protective.
Yeah.
And, that's one of those things that I think, and I think you would agree with me on this, you want a certain level of protectiveness from the mother, especially if you're keeping them out on pasture. But there's a fine line between aggression and protective instinct.
Right, yeah.
And somebody that's brand new to pigs isn't going to pick up on that.
Yeah, and exactly. I mean, you made a good point there. Being used to goats, and those are not two comparative animals when it comes to interacting with young. There's times you scoop up a piglet, you better be ready to dash off, because
exactly. You better be able to hurdle that fence.
Exactly, because she's going to come after you. Well, like you said, it sounds like it worked out in the end. But yeah, it's kind of that learning curve that you have. I know you run into that when people buy livestock off of you and they're not 100% sure what they're getting or what they're doing.
And that's one of the things that I really try to, especially with the American guinea hog. It's a bit of a different breed, and it's a lard hog. It's a low and slow proposition. It's not the buy it in March and take it to the freezer in November. That's not that. So I really spend a lot of time when people contact me about buying piglets off of me in asking questions and educating them on what the animal is and what it isn't, and trying to make sure that it's a good fit. And I've turned people down from getting piglets for me because I just didn't feel like it was going to be a good fit for them. And at the end of the day, I didn't feel like it was going to be a good fit for the pig. And I didn't want it to be a black mark on the breed.
Yeah.
And so, I really try to be very selective. I would rather pass on a sale than to put a pig in a bad situation.
Yeah, that's great.
It's very, again, for me, helping this breed recover is a huge part of that. And you don't want to put the breed behind the eight ball, so to speak, by having those bad situations. One other thing, I back to the lady up there in Vermont, one of the good things that ended up coming out of that is she had bought a boar for, there's actually two great things that came out of this whole situation. First of all, she had bought a boar to start her own breeding program up there, and when I saw the boar was just, it was a nice-looking pig. And so I was able to work out a deal with her in some barter for some feeders in the spring to be able to bring him back to the farm. So now I have two unrelated boars that I'll be able to, hopefully in the future, sell breeding pairs, where in the past I hadn't been able to do that. But then the other great thing that happened out of that whole situation is that by breeding the father to the daughter, I really got some of the nicest looking pigs that I've ever had here. And it wasn't just that they were nice looking pigs, but the temperaments on these are just absolutely everything that you would want in American guinea hog. My boar is a very, very chill boar to begin with. And then the mama pig is just, again, one of the sweetest pigs I've ever had. Absolutely love that pig. And so by doing that combination that I probably wouldn't have done on purpose, I was really able to get some very, very nice pigs, and just sent one of them off this week to be the sire of a new herd just south of us. And the thing that was really cool there is that the guy that was buying the pig, he's actually raised other breeds before, and he was just blown away by the temperament of that pig.
Yeah.
He was just taken back by how chill and docile and just how friendly it is. And so that really, in the end, it all worked out well.
Excellent. All right. Well, good. So obviously with guinea hogs and your maturity dates, how are you managing to overwinter those? What's your infrastructure like when it comes to your pasture and then overwintering your hogs? That's
one of the things that is a huge challenge for me, and that is that during during the summertime, they have, they're not huge paddocks, but they're good-sized paddocks where, they have access to especially great when in the fall when the wind's blowing and those hickory nuts are dropping around, they just go crazy. It's like crack to them. They're just running around like gangbusters down in there.
Yeah.
But during the winter, and here in upstate New York, we sometimes can get a lot of snow, and sometimes we don't get much snow, but it certainly does get cold. And so for us, the biggest problem is the watering situation. That's just something that I have not been able to solve yet, besides just carrying water by 5-gallon buckets full.
Yeah.
So what I really try to do in the wintertime is I try to, and it's really with all of my animals in the wintertime, I really try to concentrate and consolidate animals as closely together as I can, keeping in mind, that obviously there's issues with that. And so, I'm constantly, I'm lucky that I live not too far from a local town barn where there's a big, huge pile of wood chips. And so I'm constantly putting the carbon diaper on it, I guess, as Joel Salatin calls it.
Right, yeah.
And just really socking the wood chips and using that deep litter method with really all of my animals throughout the winter. And then the upside to that is then you have a great amount of compost for the garden. Not the following year, but the year after you let it age. So.
Yeah. No, that's great. And you got to do what you can. There are times that I lament not having a cold enough winter that it freezes, because we end up just having a muddy mess for about 3 months, and it gets a bit frustrating. But
yeah, and that's why that's where again it kind of is. It's kind of a catch-22 situation. This summer was a very, very dry summer for us up here. I think it was for you it was a little bit more of a wet summer, but for us it was a very dry summer.
Yeah. And
from a garden perspective, that sucked. But from a pig management perspective, it was awesome, because everything, it wasn't super hot, but things were kind of dried up. And so I could really stay ahead of in the areas where, I have pigs, because in some areas I do have pigs in an enclosure that's just hog panels, so 4 hog panels, 1 pig in there. And so I was able to really stay ahead of putting the wood chips in there and, kind of doing that deep litter thing. Where in the spring and in the late fall, when you're getting all of that rain, it sometimes is a challenge to stay ahead of that. And it's just that muddy mess.
Yeah, I bet. So the fact that you're on just a little over 2 acres for the entire property, how much do you have designated for your pigs?
I would say right now, roughly, it's tough to say, but probably about a third of it would be for my pigs.
Yep.
A lot of the wooded area is for the pigs, and then I do have, again, a couple of those paddocks that are set up that are the 4x4s, for hog panels. My goal, and I hope to do it this year, but then with the whole COVID thing, we put all of our effort and energy and money into the garden, trying to make sure we could grow enough food.
Right.
But there's a strip of woods that I have, and part of it is I've never really discovered where the boundary is, but my property butts up against the Old Town dump. And so it's all capped off. It's been capped off for 30 years. But there's a buffer zone there between me and the dump that I don't technically own, but nobody's going to give me any grief if I put up some temporary electric fence and put some pigs down in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so my hope this year had been to kind of do that and really have a little bit more of a rotational system where I could take the pigs off of the ground that they're on now and kind of just rotate them around, and I could set up probably 2 other nice-sized paddocks. But obviously that didn't happen this year. Hopefully next year that'll take place.
Yeah, definitely. No, that sounds like a good plan. I mean, if it's fallow land and nobody's using it, then and you keep everything temporary, no permanent infrastructure, then it's one of those, just do it and wait for somebody to tell you to stop.
Exactly. And the thing is, I have a really great relationship with both of my neighbors on both sides, and they are both of the same cloth that I am, that, live and let live. So, and we work together great. If they have a problem, I help them out, and if I have a problem, they've helped me out. And when I go on vacation, they'll come over and look in on the animals, and I do the same for them. And so it's just really a great group of neighbors that I have here. But you also want to make sure you respect them as well, and I do my best to try to make sure my pigs stay where they're supposed to be. As they say, good fences make good neighbors. So
yeah.
We're trying to make sure that we don't encroach too much on them.
Sure, absolutely. Well, Brian, you'd mentioned your pasture layout there, and then even hog panels. Now, do you have any shelter that you have to have since it gets so cold up there, or they manage well out without it?
No, I have shelters, and my shelters are. In fact, I don't think I have two shelters that are the same. A lot of it has been doing the best you can with what you got, and working with materials that you have available. And sometimes it's been a matter of, I had a bit of an emergency and I needed to throw something together quick. Other times it's been, somebody saying, hey, do you want a doghouse? And sure. And I bring it home, and that becomes some housing for pigs.
Right.
So right now, I have one house that is made out of pallets covered in plywood with some old tin on top of it. One of my shelters is basically it's an A-frame with some old tin on it. Another shelter is the doghouse that we brought from a coworker's house. And then I also have it was supposed to be a hoop-style chicken coop, except that when I built it thinking I was doing the right thing by using pressure-treated 2x6s on the base. The problem with that is that you add a whole heck of a lot of weight when you do that.
Right.
And my dad always would say it's heavier than a dead preacher. And so you couldn't move it around the yard. And at the time when I first built those things, I was working a job where I did quite a bit of traveling. And my wife was left trying to move those things around on the yard, and it didn't work out well. Let's just put it that way. I don't think my yard has ever fully recovered from that disaster. We thought that we were doing a good thing by raising standard breed roosters. It was a disaster.
Oh, wow.
But anyhow, so one of those hoop coops got parked for the pigs, and the other hoop coop got parked as the rabbitry and a winter run for my chickens.
Yeah.
And so neither one of them are mobile any longer.
Right, yeah.
And then I also set up a summer shelter it's just T-posts and arched cattle panels that I cover with tarps.
Yeah.
But it won't support a snow load. So here in a couple of weeks, what I'll do is I'll dismantle. I really won't dismantle. I just take the tarp off of it. And then those pigs will have access to the hoop coop shelter. And then the other thing that I use as well is, I don't know if you've seen, you probably have, I can't remember if they call it the $30 or the $50 chicken tractor from Off-Grid with Doug and Stacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I built one of those, and I have used that. That thing has been amazing as far as multi-purpose. I have used that for meat birds. I've used that for turkeys. I've used that for piglets. It's too small for a large-size American guinea hog, but right now I'm using that with a little boar that only had one testicle, so I couldn't castrate it.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'll harvest him early here in late December, mid-December-ish, and we'll have we'll do smoked pork ribs for Christmas, and the shoulders we'll use for pork and sauerkraut for New Year's, and then the hams I'll do into prosciutto. So.
Oh, yeah, sounds great, man. Very good. All right. So where have transition over? So where have you settled on feed? How are you taking care of feed? What's your regimen? What's your plan? What's your choice when it comes to feeding out your AGH?
Yeah, that's been something that I have really experimented a lot with feed. When I first started into the American Guinea Hogs, I was doing I had a sprouting system, the 5-gallon bucket sprouting system, and I think I was running it about 4 or 5 days, I think, on the just to get it to the condition that I wanted, because I was using a mixture of barley, rye, and oats, and the rye sprouted very quickly. The barley sprouted fairly quickly, but the oats took forever to sprout. And so in order to get kind of what I wanted to see, I think I was taking it to about 5 days. So I had 5 buckets, and I was just rotating them through that. And then I was mixing in a hog mineral. But that really was very labor intensive. And when I really sat down and figured it out, when I first started doing it, I was able to source the barley from a local farmer. I was able to source the oats from a local farmer, and I was able to source the rye from a local farmer. So it was and I was really getting a great deal on the rye. So it was fairly cost effective, but being able to get the rye kind of dried up, and then in New York State, they implemented the Farm Brewery Act here. And so then barley became more expensive. And so I was left with oats, and then I was buying wheat from a local feed store. Well, when I sat down and I did the math on it, I really wasn't saving a whole heck of a lot of money doing it, and I was putting a lot of labor into it. And we were going to go on vacation a couple of years ago, and I was like, I really don't want to saddle the person that I'm leaving the farm with dealing with that. And so I moved over to a commercial hog feed that I get from a local feed mill. Mm-hmm. And that's been their base diet ever since. And what I do with that is I feed them twice a day, about a quart per adult pig. And then if I've got a nursing sow, she'll get 2 to 3 quarts, depending on her condition. And then with the piglets, I just kind of eyeball it. And as they grow, I increase the feed.
Yeah.
And then we supplement it with, last week I was able to get a whole bunch of pumpkins from farm stands that were closing down. And so, I'll feed that to them. Periodically, I'm able to get some spent grain from a local brewery. And so I'll mix that in there as well. And pre-COVID, my mom and dad's church had a food pantry. And when they had leftover bread from the food pantry, then my mom and dad would bring that to me, and I would sparingly, throughout the week feed that to them as well.
Yeah.
But it's predominantly the locally sourced pig feed, and it's a commercial feed. It's not non-GMO. It's not organic, anything like that. I had really looked into all of that, and from a cost perspective, it was just astronomical, the difference. And I'm not somebody who has a whole lot of confidence in the food chain there, so to speak.
Right.
I've just read too many stories where quote unquote organic grain. Well, let's say conventional grain went on the boat in Turkey and it came off as organic grain in the United States.
Right.
So I would much rather buy from a local guy, even if he's using, conventional methods, because I know I'm getting what I'm paying for.
Yeah, that's been my attitude as well. A, first of all, because it's cost prohibitive, but B, I'm the same way. If I'm going to, lesser of the evils to me is to buy conventional and know it was raised local, and at least you know what you're getting there.
And the other piece to it as well is, if you start thinking about, and some people are concerned about the carbon footprint and so on and so forth, you stop and you think about having that grain shipped from the other side of the world, the impact that has on the environment.
Yeah.
And then the other piece to it as well is I'm not 100% convinced that in some of those countries that are sending us quote unquote organic grain, that their methods of farming would be what we would consider environmentally friendly anyhow. So
yeah.
For me, I just prefer to support a local guy, and but I understand why people choose a different path, and it's all good.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. To each his own. It's what your market will bear and what's best for your operation. Certainly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Brian, man, I feel like we could probably go on talking for hours, but we probably shouldn't do that to our podcast listeners. But I do want to hit a couple quick things with you real quick. So you had mentioned your customer base and just to kind of figure out your market there when it comes time to actually selling your wholes and halves. What have you done? How have you worked to generate those leads? Where do those come from usually?
Some of it has been family and friends. Some of it has been word of mouth. I do advertise on our farm Facebook page, and so people found out about it there as well. And so it's kind of been a little bit of this, a little bit of that. A recent sale that I had came from another farmer. Somebody had reached out to a friend of mine, and he didn't have any pigs available, but he sent them my way. And that's one of the other things that's been great. Now, this particular individual is not an American guinea hog person. He raises, I call them pink pigs. I'm not exactly sure what the the breed is. But one of the great things about being a part of the American Guinea Hog Association, though, is that it's a pretty close-knit community, and there's not a sense of competition. It's a matter of somebody might contact me and say, do you have a pig available? And at that point in time, I might not. And so I'll start contacting other, breeders in the area to say, hey, what do you have? Do you have anything that would fit this individual's need? And they do the same thing for me. And so that also has been a source of sales for me.
Good deal. Yeah, that works out well. It's good to have that network in place.
It is. And that's, that's one of the many benefits of being a member of the breed association.
Certainly. Well, I have to ask you the question that I ask everyone, and you're probably familiar with what's coming. But so with your experience in raising pigs on pasture, what is your favorite part of doing that?
And I was trying to figure out how to answer that question because, obviously the easy answer is bacon.
That's right.
I think that's
a given.
The easy answer.
Yeah.
They taste great. But, I just, there's so much enjoyment and satisfaction that comes from it. It's a matter of knowing that I'm helping a breed recover. There's a sense of satisfaction that comes from that. Being able to, when you sit down to your dinner and you look at your plate, and on your plate, 75, 80% of your food came from your homestead. That's an awesome feeling. In fact, this past Sunday, it wasn't pork; it was a goose. My mom and dad came down, and we had roast goose and we had roast duck. It was the first time I'd ever had goose. Loved it, but looking at that plate, like 95% of the food on that plate on Sunday was stuff that we had a hand in raising and growing or processing here on our homestead.
Yeah.
So I think that's another huge part of it. And just pigs are fun. They have such great personalities, and I can just sit and watch pigs all day.
Yeah,
they're just a hoot. So
yeah,
I love them. I've told my wife, especially my boy, I've told her that the day that he leaves this farm, whether it's going over the rainbow or I sell him on to somebody else, I will cry like a little baby. And I just make no bones about it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to have that connection with your livestock, definitely. Well, Before I ask you the question about how people can find you, I do want to point out to everyone that Brian does have a podcast of his own. It's homesteading related, and it's called the Homestead Journey Podcast. It's a really good podcast. You guys need to check it out if you're interested in more of the broader scope of homesteading and small farming. It's very entertaining. I like I like your variety of topics. So it's good stuff. But other than your podcast, Brian, how can people find out more about your setup?
Well, we are on Facebook, probably too much on Facebook and Instagram. On Instagram, they can find us, the Homestead Journey. I think it's the Homestead Journey. I don't think it's the Homestead Journey podcast, but try either one. You'll find us. The same thing on Facebook. We also have a farm page, so 3B Farm on Facebook as well. I try to use the farm site on Facebook to, for sales for the farm, and then the podcast to kind of, talk more about homesteading. But obviously there's bleed over between the two. And then our website is thehomesteadjourney.net, and so there's more information there as well.
Wonderful. All right. Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me, and I really enjoyed it, and I pray you have a good rest of the week.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Take care. So I really enjoyed talking to Brian. He's one of those guys that you just talk to. I think that actually was the very first conversation I've ever had with him. But you have a conversation with a guy like that, and you think, okay, I've known this guy forever. It's just really neat to talk to those people. I don't know that Brian's ever met a stranger, though. He seems like they're one of those personality types. I'd like to see him in person one of these days. Maybe that's an excuse to get back up to New York to be able to roam around that beautiful land. Well, again, I hope everyone is enjoying the podcast. We're still playing around with the sound a little bit. It's hilarious. If you guys actually would see my setup here, how I've had to Appalachian engineer this to get this to work, because we live so rural, only have a landline, and the technology I've tried to acquire to record landline conversations is pretty lousy. It's either 30-year-old technology or it costs $1 gazillion, which I don't have. But so I don't know if you noticed, there's a little bit of a hum in this call, and the reason why with Brian is it was actually raining that day. So yes, when it rains in our area, rain gets in the water line, or rain gets in the water line. It's what it is. It's a water line instead of a phone line. Rain gets in the phone line and actually creates that interference. There's times that we can't even hear people because the interference is so bad. But as I say, that's the price to pay to live in paradise. So we're going to continue to make tweaks on that. Hopefully it improves. We're going to look at some other options there. Maybe one of these days, if somebody wants to pay me $1 gazillion to advertise on the podcast, we can invest in some better equipment. But until then, if you have any suggestions, any comments, if you want to come on the podcast or specific topics, let me know. Be more than happy to pursue those. It's one of those things where I try to seek things out, but it's much better sometimes when you all recommend things for me or you decide to come on yourself. Well, I pray everyone have a great week. Please stay safe. COVID's on the rise right now at the time of recording this, so I pray that everyone if you just spend time out in the pasture with your pigs and don't talk to other people, don't come face to face with other people, then you'll be okay. But I know that's hard this time of year. So everyone stay safe and God bless. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast, or to submit topics, or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.